Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the September 25th, 2019 school committee meeting. Please, for roll call, everyone is here. Steve Bjork is, except for Steve Bjork. Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll start with our approval of items by consensus. We have approval of minutes, September 11, 2019. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mrs. Burns. Second, Mrs. Newhouse. All in favor? That's unanimous. And we have the approval of the Maurice Newkirk Library Award Book Love Foundation Grant to Lisa Desberg, English teacher, Wilmington High School, in the amount of $2,000. And Ms. Desberg is here, so we would welcome her to come up, and yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. And so I know we were all excited. We got a very nice packet, and so we were very excited to read all about the award. Do you want to share just a little bit with us, and then if we have any questions?
Sure. My department head, CTL, Mia Parviainen, who's an inspiration to our entire department and school district, encouraged everyone in the department to apply. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, that's a big undertaking. So MJ and I talked about spending night after night filling out the application and then just hoping. And sure enough, when I got the award, I was so excited for my classes. I've been here for 18 years. I hope to be here for another 18 at least. So that's doubling the class size library, which is a big deal. It is. So I spent all but just a few cents, so I think Paul would be happy about that. It's true.
In the black again, yay.
So about 450 applicants all across America and Canada applied, and 60 received the grant. So I cried for a week straight when I got it. So they should be coming any day.
That's exciting. We offer you lots of congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for
I'll
putting
make
all
sure
that
to
work
fill you in.
Any
You're
comments or questions from the board?
I'd just like to share, and I spoke to Ms. Desberg because I was just elated. I thought it was very thoughtful that her application was included in our materials because it shared an insight into the classroom and in what Ms. Desberg does, as well as I'm sure other teachers do, with regards to what their classrooms and how they're teaching and what it looks like. And it's an insight not often seen, especially at this table, or even for parents. So I very much appreciated her application being a part of that to give us further insight on all the wonderful things that you do in educating and instilling and impassioning our students to read. You're welcome.
Thank you for reading it.
You're very welcome.
Mr. Ragsdale?
I also wanted to commend you for filling out that entire application. As I started to look through it, it's like, oh wow, there's more questions. Wow, this thing is long.
It was about 20 hours.
and of course the depth that they were asking you to go into, and the breadth of different issues they asked about. I also found it very, very enlightening to read just as an insight as to what happens in your classrooms, and to the amount of thought that you put into the lessons that you teach, into even just something that I think in a lot of cases probably seems very simple, just like, oh, book library, sure, it's just books in a room, and like, oh, well, it's a lot more than just that. And so it's given again that it was kind of a long shot that they said they only accept 6% and of the people. So that's a lot of work to put in for something that is a long shot to begin with, and it's wonderful that it worked out. And I really appreciate that even at the high school level that you put so much focus on inculcating the joy of reading, because I think that's something we don't think about a lot at the secondary level. We talk a lot about elementary literacy and inculcating the love of reading when they're little and read to your kids, but we don't talk as much about making sure that they sustain a love of reading at the secondary level and that they take that with them when they leave us. And so I think that was wonderful to read about. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. I think Brittany Tuttle over at the Wilmington Memorial Library will be extremely happy this year that I won't have to email her every week and incur many, many fines that she waives for me. It's true. She laughed about that too, but it is true.
She is a great resource.
Oh, a great resource. In fact, she's getting a fantasy book for a student who's reading a trilogy who can't find it. She doesn't have a hard copy. She'll get it on a Kindle and get it to me early next week. I was like, thanks. We're good.
Mr.
And I'll
Simola.
just add, as a fellow teacher, I teach English as well, at the high school level, and I know the sort of independent reading stuff is really important, at the high school level, and being able to have like a good library of stuff that kids are interested in, rather than the dusty old books that might have been sitting around, for 20 years. You know, so I just think that it's fantastic that that's, you know, this, like somebody said before, it gives you a good snapshot. I think Ms. Burns said that. It gives you a good snapshot of what's going on in the classroom. And I love that, you know, as a teacher, like it's great that it's happening here. And, you know, congratulations again, just on, you know, this is a lot of work and you weren't really sure that you were gonna get it, but it's fantastic. And I think
We'll
I'm-
have to chat.
I know. We will. I actually wrote it down. I'm like, I think I'm gonna apply next year.
The Twitter world is a great PLN for that, so
Okay.
start there for
All
sure.
right.
And then
Okay.
well, you have a copy of mine?
Yeah, I've got the whole thing. I got copious notes.
I can proofread it for you.
And your book choices are just phenomenal. I mean, so Educated, which I just finished.
Oh, my goodness.
The Hate You Give on the Come Up. I mean, just beautiful, beautiful literature and really based on issues of equity and inclusion. So I was so thrilled to see what our high school students are exposed to and what they're reading. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Have a great rest of the meeting. See you soon.
We do need to take a motion. Does anyone like to make the motion?
Right, I'm not
Well,
sure
you can
about the
actually, you don't have to
formality.
sit there. Want to make sure we don't forget that, or Paul will say, Jen, what do you, Mr. Ragsdale?
I move to accept the award.
A second. Mrs. Newhouse, all in favor? That is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for
Bye-bye,
coming
thanks.
tonight. We
I'll send a
appreciate-
picture of all the books when they come.
And pictures of the kids reading the
Oh,
book.
you bet.
Yeah.
That's all over Twitter and Instagram.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on, we have some warrants. GF03, R204, L12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, FS02 and 03. Is there a motion? Mr. Fennelly, seconded by Mrs. Newhouse. All in favor? That is unanimous. We have payroll ending in 9/25/19. Is there a motion? Mrs. Burns, thank you. Seconded by Mr. Ragsdale. All in favor? And that is unanimous. And then we have SPED 04. Mr. Samaha, seconded by Mr. Fennelly. All in favor? So that's 2 abstentions. Thank you. And that brings us to the superintendent's report. Dr. Burns.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. A few items to note and mentioned. Some are included in the packet this evening, some are not. But I'll start with the first two that are. The walking school bus program is included and is attached. This, as I had the pleasure to come to learn, has certainly has a bit of history here in Wilmington Public Schools, which is great to see. And thanks very much to Laura Stinson, who is, I know, a strong advocate for this, but also in partnership with our local police as well, too, obviously as a means to try and promote activity and such. Just to let the community know, on October 16th, the Woburn Street School will be having their first walk to school for children and staff to enjoy. There's a rain date of October 17th. Of course, this information will be sent out to the Woburn families, and the buses are inviting a number of students to participate in the fall walking school bus. And the success is building, it seems very clear, with this, I'll call it a program, for lack of a better word, with the intention in the spring to expand it to and include the North Shawshene as well. So an informational update for the committee and members of the community. Again, thank you to the Wilmington Police and especially Officer Brian Moon for his partnership with Ms. Stinson and as well the North Reading Transportation Company for that. Secondly, the Elevate Science program is in the form of a science curriculum update, and it's attached here, and a wonderful memo that has been collaborated on by Dr. Regan, Ms. Murphy, and Ms. Iasconi. It's here purely for informational purposes. This is an item that went out to our elementary families, of course, as it relates to science. And it's these kind of things that I think also is good to include for informational purposes for the community at large as well, knowing that many parents don't have students perhaps right now within the elementary level. Dr. Regan, I'm not sure if you want to add anything at all to this, or?
I'll just say it went home through Blackboard Connect, I think Monday, Monday. So, and we did get some nice feedback from a couple of parents, so I appreciate that. Just thanking the district for supporting it, and they're excited about it.
I'll segue into the note of the CIT day today. As you know, we had our first CIT day, curriculum improvement time, and the science program at the elementary level was a focal point of a lot of the sessions, and I had the chance, as Dr. Regan, to attend and sit in on those, and so lots of professional, lots of professional learning already as it relates to the launch of this, as well as, of course, learning that was happening throughout the district. Thank you to Dr. Regan for his organization of that, and I know he's been working very collaboratively and closely with Ms. Murphy and Ms. Iasconi. Start time committee, just a brief update. There's nothing in the packet on this, but information, as you know, has gone out to members of the community to solicit volunteers following your vote of approval for the committee and that's purpose, so that's rolling out. People were asked to respond this week, and so I'll work to get the members of that committee together. I don't know what the response rate has looked like yet, but I'll work with Ms. Dixie to assemble that. And part of my commitment, as you know, is to circle back to the committee so that you know who's serving on that committee as that gets started. Two other items to note. This afternoon, information went out to families about a new, again, I'll call it a program, for lack of a better word, at the middle school, ACE, as it's referred to, the After School Clubs and Enrichment. This is, it's being run and overseen by Ms. Parker, who oversees our CARES program. This is intentionally given a different name, really in an effort to try and not associate it by default with CARES, although she's organizing it and will be attending to the registration and such. But the ACE program is an effort specifically to certainly not replace the activities that we have currently at the middle school, but to expand after-school opportunities for students and to provide some flexibility in terms of creative thinking, new and innovative ideas and programs that staff may come up with to try and provide an outlet for students to get involved after school. We have 5 activities that are being offered in the first of 3 sessions. The first session starting in October 15th, and will run through to December 19th. The cost, along the lines of CARES and every effort to make this very accessible or affordable, is $60 per student, per club for, I forget the total number of sessions, I think it's 9. And so we have 5 sessions, as I mentioned. They're running on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'll add just to this piece, because I know that this has been something of interest by members of the committee who've raised this before previously, and as I've come to learn, the middle school used to have an after-school bus that was running, I'm not sure how many years ago that was, but a little bit of time ago. There's also intention to bring back the after-school bus to support transportation for these clubs and activities for those students who may be participating. And that information is all included in the outreach that Ms. Parker sent out. So just informational, but to make you aware of that. And then finally, just to bring to your attention in the communities, the 4th annual vigil is coming up this Sunday night, September the 29th at 7. The vigil is really organized by the Wilmington Substance Abuse Coalition. The schools have certainly have involvement in that coalition, as I think many of you know. Dr. Regan as well sitting on that. But this is the 4th annual event, and I'm just looking specifically at their PR around this. The Night of Healing and Hope will include a slideshow to remember lost loved ones, and it's really the purpose around focusing on those in the community that have lost others to disease of addiction, and to celebrate those who are living healthy lives once again. So this is an event that's open to anyone, again, Sunday, September the 29th, 7 o'clock at the Wilmington Town Common. And with that, that's it for this evening, unless folks have any questions for me.
Mrs. Burns?
Thank you. I had just a really quick question. With regards to the late bus, so I'm assuming that, is that a guarantee? I mean, I know you stated that it was your intent to bring back the late bus for the middle school programming. I just didn't know if there was anything preventing it from occurring. I didn't know
So
how
this-
to
Yeah, I'm sorry.
receive that information.
So the specific, I'm sorry if I wasn't, if I was causing any confusion, but the intention is to offer those students who are participating in the ACE program the opportunity to ride a late bus. And the structure of those routes will be, there are two, I think, and that they're not the same, they're not the same routes as the regular transportation to and from school. They simply can't be. So they will follow a route that was in place, I think, previously, as I understand it, sort of a wide sweeping area, not stops everywhere, but come close to, hopefully most stops. But that's the target group or audience right now,
Okay.
if you will, not audience, student body to ride those.
I just wanted to make sure it was going to be in place for that. That
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
I think, where I assumed, but I didn't
Sure.
want to. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to new business. And 6A is our MASC delegate to the annual convention. So we will vote to appoint a school committee member as the delegate for our MASC event, which is coming up in, the first week of November. And so, is anyone interested in serving as a delegate? I know that you've done this in the past and you are there, so I think
Very-
first we need to talk
Very
about
happy
who's
to do it.
going to be
I
there.
also don't want to prohibit anybody who may be interested. I've done it for 7 of the 8 years, and I don't mind. I don't want, taking it on, but I certainly don't want to shadow anybody who may be interested in doing so.
And this-
Maybe we ask how many of us are going to be there?
So who is it? I'm planning on attending, but I will not be there on Wednesday, which is when?
When is the
It's-
delegate
occurs.
assembly?
It's Friday
Oh, it's
afternoon.
Friday afternoon, okay. So-
I believe so. I looked at
I
the
think
booklet
that's right.
yesterday, and I
Okay.
believe they've got it back on Friday afternoon.
All right.
I'll be there, but
I'm also going to be there on Friday and Saturday from
I'll be there
Thursday night
Thursday
till
to Friday,
Saturday.
but probably not late Friday. Anyone from the Saturday? Okay.
looks like it's us for breakfast.
Any interest?
No, I'm
Okay.
happy for
So you're happy for?
Mrs. Burns to do it if she
and-
if she will
I'd
consent.
be happy to do it.
Happy and grateful, and I know, and I think you enjoy it, so.
I do.
But
I
we are
find it-
we are
I do.
grateful that you
But
go to this
again-
conference every year and represent, and you probably received some literature in the mail just this week, and so we will come back and talk about those prior to, will we talk about them
We
prior
do.
to?
Prior to them,
Yeah.
I think what we'll do is, hopefully on the agenda, we will discuss each of the resolutions that are coming before the delegation for voting, and we'll discuss if there's anything I'm not sure of, what as we've done in the past, the resolutions are what being brought forth to the whole of the association for voting. For information that I'm not clear on, I usually do get additional information. Some of it deals with regional schools, things that they've been working in the legislative bodies as to what they've been lobbying for. But we discuss it, address any concerns, and then we decide as a body here how you'd like me to vote. And depending upon how the conversation goes at the delegation, because it's like a town meeting, there's pros and cons, people will speak to it, depending if the resolution is amended in any way. It still gives me that ability to try to make the best decision from the conversations we have, but typically I'll bring our vote to that delegation meeting.
Thank you. Yes.
So I move to appoint Mrs. Burns to be our delegate to the MASC conference.
Mr. Fennelly, second. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you again. 6B, FY19 final revolving fund report. Mr. Ruggiero?
Thank you. I provide you with a FY19 revolving fund report, also with some brief descriptions of the revenues and expenses in each of those revolving funds. This is one group of revenues and expenses that will ultimately flow into our FY19 end of the year report, which I am currently working on. That's the report that we have to provide to the state that shows every penny that comes in and goes out of the district. So as you can see in the report that, again, where all the revolving accounts, as they should be, are in the black.
Questions?
Actually, I have a question, and maybe it's because I don't clearly understand this. When you look at the top, it says, each different, revenue expenses, then it says activity. What is activity? What is
That's
that? What is
just
that?
revenues less expenses, just
Oh, okay.
the net of that year, that fiscal year.
gotcha.
So, Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's all.
Okay. Yep.
So the
Alright.
FY19
Yep.
balance is the FY18 balance plus the activity column, and that gives you the
Okay.
FY19 balance.
All right, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is for our information only, so without seeing a need for further discussion, we'll move on to 6C, which is the enrollment report. Dr. Brand?
Yes, thank you. In your packet is a first glimpse, if you will, of our unofficial enrollment numbers for the 2019-2020 school year. And I say that specifically for a couple of reasons. First off, I think as many of you know, public school districts across the state do submit to the Department of Education continuously their enrollment, but specifically the Department of Ed captures enrollment as of October 1st, and so we commonly refer to our population as a reference point of the October 1 numbers, even if there's fluctuation throughout the course of the year. This is not the October 1st report, so I do want to make that clear. It's as was reported from our individual schools, and so while it certainly will be fairly accurate and reflect October 1 numbers, they may shift slightly. But it's a first glance effort to try and provide an overall sense to myself, my central office colleagues, and of course you as a committee around where the enrollment is falling. So it's not a perfect document. Again, the October 1 report, which comes forth and is made available in November, I think usually late October, November by DESE, and I'll certainly follow up with you with that. That would be the document to be more specific around a more of a thorough or careful analysis, a deeper analysis of some of the changes. But we certainly, are honing in and watching what the trends are, if you will. Of particular note, last year, and certainly understandably will again be this year, what is our retention rate of students flowing from middle school to high school? Knowing that we have a number of students that attend schools elsewhere after middle school. So I don't have that specific retention rate here, but I'll provide a comparison for last year. You can see overall, we're hovering around, we're down a little bit right now, as, again, if this is somewhat accurate, of approximately 30, 35 students. It gets a little more tricky when you also factor in the OOD as out-of-district placements for special education students, and then pre-K and K. We sometimes separate. This does not thoroughly showcase, if you will, the special education population, and that's just a self-reporting piece around some principals included in their totals. Some may have separated it. But it gives you a general sense at this point in time of where we land. And so, again, once that October 1st report is finalized and made public by the department, certainly that's a document that is publicly available, first off. But will be full intention to come back to you with that and a little bit of a deeper analysis. All of that being said, happy to take any questions if you have any.
Okay,
Sorry, Paul.
If I could just add something. So the October 1st numbers, is what goes into our, when we do the FY21 budget, there's an enrollment slide, if you will, and that gets updated with the October 1st numbers. And just informationally, October 1st numbers enrollment numbers are what are used by the state to calculate Chapter 70 funding for school districts for next year. So for FY '21, Chapter 70 funding is based on October 1st of '19 enrollment numbers. So that's kind of how that works. That's why the October 1st number is the important one, if you will. Sorry.
No, thank you.
Mrs. Burns?
I just had, and I've taken into consideration that this is the unofficial, and
Right,
it's, you know,
right.
there's shifting that can
Yes.
transpire.
Sure.
I think I'd at least very much like to at least bring to the attention where, looking at Woburn Street, first grade, there's a 30 pupil, 30 student pupil difference,
Right.
along with grade 3, and especially grade 5 with the north. And I try to compare the previous years to the, do that shifting number thing, which
Yeah.
is a juggle. And I'd be curious, and maybe just a little too early to find out if there's, what the basis of, those are large numbers that I've not seen before in the transitions between those grades, and I just, it just has me concerned. I guess I'm more curious than anything.
I could speak to the north, and this has been since kindergarten, that this year's fifth grade class is abnormally small on both sides of town. It's every year we have to drop 2 teachers for this class because they're so small.
Oh, thank you.
And I know when they were doing the kindergarten enrollment, the year that they entered, our administrators were actually calling local preschools and stuff, feeling like they were missing students, and it's just,
Just it happens to be an unusually small
Small.
class. Okay.
yeah.
That's exactly right.
Thank you.
'Cause on this analysis, when you have FY '20 versus '19, it's not a true, because you have to look at last year's third grade is this year's fourth
Fourth grade.
grade.
Well, that's
Last
how
year's
I-
fifth grade, so when you move them around, this might be right where we thought it would have been.
Okay.
And it's typically, up until the middle school, the retention rate's in the 98 to even to 101%. It stays pretty
So
flat.
technically, it's not a big drop-off, like
But I
for the,
think-
let's say, the
yeah.
third grade at Woburn Street was 123 last year.
Mm.
This year's fourth grade class, 2020 is 117, so that's a drop of 6 students,
And that
as
could-
opposed to
yeah,
60.
Right.
Yeah, or 30, excuse me,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
And you can see that abnormally large increase at the north and fourth grade is not really because there was like a giant influx in fourth grade. It's compared to the previous year. You see those 100 students that the previous year were fourth graders. Now,
Right.
the fourth grade is at a more normal population, so it shows up as a big increase there because of that
Gotcha.
small fifth grade class.
Very good. Thank you for that clarification, it's helpful.
Can I ask, and I don't know if you have a sense of this information or not, but what the average sort of, maybe drop-off is the wrong word, but how many students we average as a loss between the 8th and the 9th grade? And I only ask because, sort of in the inverse to what the 5th grade class looks like, the middle school classes, especially the 6th grade, are seeming pretty high by comparison to what's in the high school right now. So how many of the middle school students do we expect to lose each year?
So Paul might be able to add to this, but I know and I recall that looking at this a little bit more deeply last year, the data prior to 2 years ago was more of a steady state, if you will, and I can't remember the exact retention rate. There was a variation, a pretty significant variation, though, 2 years ago, from going from 8th to 9th grade, and there was a spike, if you will, in the number of students that were leaving Wilmington and going to some other school in some other community or some other schooling. I think, I think it was around 50 students, I believe, and then it jumped up to around 80.
Okay.
I would want to double check that.
Yeah, of
But I
course.
think it was in that range, and so I deliberately, I have full intentions to model those numbers again, but once we have the final October 1 numbers.
Yeah.
But I think it was around that range. So, we did have, I think the retention rate's a little bit, based upon this, is a little bit higher for the better, going from 8th to 9th grade than it was last year, but.
I I will note too that when this high school opened up, it was the students, majority of our students will go, well, those students who don't come here will go to Shawshene. And I do know when the high school opened up, it was the smallest. We had more students coming here than we've typically seen past years. I don't know from that juncture what it has looked like since. We did go through a rough period of transition, which I think saw a little impact in our enrollment, but I think we've been on a steady, it's been a short time, but I'm optimistic that I think we're going to be on either steady upswing or just, solid, consistency with, I'm hoping anyway. with students.
And I know, having followed the committee for a few years before I got on, that those numbers sound familiar to me, so I think that's fairly accurate, and it didn't dawn on me until looking at it just now. I mean, I looked through it before the meeting, and for some reason, it just dawned on me now, so I understand we're not entirely 100% certain, and that's completely fine. I was just curious if you had a better sense of it than I did.
And you'll bring it back to us.
I will.
And can we see that comparison as well?
Right.
Definitely.
Great.
Yeah, most definitely.
In the budget package too, when
Yeah.
we do that, that chart just does show the retention rate by grade over.
Great.
Thank you.
Very much. And that brings us to 60, Technology Committee. Dr. Brand?
Sure, thank you. And I'll ask Mr. Lord, our Director of Information Technology, to come forward. In your packet is, I'll turn over to Ken in just a second, but this is not anything requiring your action, it's information, but felt to be important information to share with you as we, with excitement, look forward to continuing to tax Mr. Lord as he's arrived in the district. And he, again, I can't tell you how great and glad we are to have him here, but very appropriately so. He's really jumping in now with this, and so this is meant to share with you a little bit of insight around his thinking and plan for the formation of the Technology Committee.
Thank you. So, as Dr. Brand alluded, our current technology plan is actually expired. It was 2013, 2018, so it's time to create a new plan. It's certainly part of our strategic plan initiatives as well. So our first task will be forming a broad-based technology committee. So I wanted to update you on the makeup of the committee, and of course there'll be hopefully school committee representation on the committee as well. It'll be a large committee because we'll need representation from teachers from multiple grade levels, departments, special education, unified arts, administration. We'll want probably some high school students on the committee as well, a community member, and of course school committee members as well. The committee will start with a very in-depth look at where we are now, what we've accomplished in the prior plan. We'll examine plans from other towns and other schools to see how they are addressing their needs. We'll look at plans like the U.S. Department of Ed's technology plan. There's lots of online resources. We'll look at our scope and sequence of technology standards, and then culminate that all into a technology plan, probably typically a 5-year plan that we'll bring back to this committee for your review.
Questions? Mr. Rex?
Yep. So we'll be kicking off seeking members from in the faculty as well as the community as well, and we'll see who's interested in the school committee. Great.
Mr. Rex?
So it sounds, from the way you describe it, I think that this is probably going to be a very broad look at technology from at the infrastructure and information technology level to, again, broadening out possibly one-to-one and instructional technology. Absolutely. And the incorporation of technology into learning. I mean, it sounds like this is kind of a top to bottom, making sure that we have the Wi-Fi routers we need, and then making sure that the teachers are properly trained to use technology in the classrooms.
Exactly. So the resulting plan will have multi-year goals for our capital plan initiatives, as well as instructional goals, perhaps staffing and other things like that.
This is kicking off quickly, so you're starting 5 to 6 times in the evening from October through the spring. So this will be,
Once we form the committee, we'll see when some meeting schedules, we'll get them out, get started, and we'll start. So there's a lot of research and understanding at the start of the head of committee to understand where we are, where we've been, where we should be going, and then the actual creation of the plan too. So.
And there was some, you did a survey when you first arrived?
I did a survey when I first arrived, so we'll review those survey results as part of the initial work the committee does. We'll determine if we need to do additional surveying or how we will data collect around that, or if whether the initial survey will be sufficient enough. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. Mr. Baxter?
One other thing, can you talk about the, choosing 5 years as a time frame for the plan? I can see, certainly in some financial, like when you talk about capital, infrastructure and those types of expenses, that makes sense to kind of have a long-term horizon for major capital expenses. But it also, 5 years in the future in technology is tough to forecast.
5 years is the typical length of time that plans are used for in technology planning. It can be 3 to 5 years. You're not going to get down to the minutia of, a student in 5 years will be using X device. It's going to be more of, where do we want one-to-one devices? What kind of quantity will there be take-home devices? Where is the continuum of the technology standards and how we're applying those? What our infrastructure needs are going forward? And the same as we'll look back on the existing technology plan, you are throwing a dart against the wall when you're getting out that far to some extent, but it's good to have a direction to go to and to constantly measure yourself against that and adjust that as necessary.
I think you just touched upon a point that with strategic plans are working documents.
Yes, absolutely.
So as the district's strategic plan, as we go along, if something does need to be adjusted for whatever circumstances unanticipated at the beginning, it can be revised and
Absolutely.
revisited.
Yeah, in my previous district, we wrote a plan when I first arrived, and I think it was the second or third year into the plan, we did kind of an update and adjusted to where we had gotten, so where we had achieved so far, and adjusted some goals and some language and things like that. So you can always do that. Yeah.
Thank you very much
Thanks,
for
Pat.
being
Thank
here.
you.
We appreciate it.
Yep.
That was my question. I have it on my computer. This brings us to 6E, Curriculum Improvement Time and Professional Development Activities, Fall 2019. Dr. Regan, is that you?
Yes. So in your packets, I just provided you with a short overview of what actually occurred today during our first CIT day of the year. We have 4 of these. The next comes up in January. And then I wanted to just give you a sense of what was going to happen on the full day PD day in November. So our CIT days are really, we're trying to focus now on what they are called curriculum improvement time. We're trying to focus them on programmatic information and curriculum improvements or writing or, training teachers. The science training was a good example of that today. And then we're trying to carve out time on the full day PD day for professional development, where teachers go and they learn something new, or they work on a skill and they can bring that back to their classroom. Sort of working from November backwards, all of the topics that you see in the column under November 5th were topics that were gathered in a survey around PD that was conducted with staff in the spring of 2018. And so when I had entered the role and we opened school last year, the window was too short for us to pull together a full day in-house PD last November. So many of our teachers went out, and we did do some things internally, but most of our teachers participated in PD out of, out of district. We belong to a consortium called NPEN, Northeast Professional Educators Network. And so many of our teachers and other staff participated in NPEN last year. Some will do that again this year, but it'll be a much smaller number. So what we focused on as the Professional Development Committee, I'm a co-chair of that committee. It has administrator and teacher representatives. We spent basically all of last year and then into the beginning of this year prepping for November 5th. So we have presenters, both some internal and some external, lined up for November 5th to come here. Mr. Lord, who just left, helped us work out an internal through Google Drive, a system to have teachers pick and choose what they want. So they will have the opportunity about mid-October to go in. They'll see a nice shiny PDF of all the things we're offering, and then they'll go to this site and they'll be able to choose from all of these opportunities over 3 different sessions. So we'll have 3 90-minute sessions that day. Some of these will be offered 3 times, so we can, the more popular ones, others might be just one in the morning and do something else in the afternoon. But it gives teachers choice, and there's a heavy focus, as you can see, around SEL and health and safety and wellness, which was a big topic that teachers were interested in. Some of our related arts programs, like music, art, PE, may select to go to some job-alike PD through NPEN, but we'll see. They have the option to choose here as well if they want. And then just backing up around today, we had 3 big buckets of professional development. The elementary classroom teachers working with 3 trainers from Pearson. We had 3 sessions. Kindergarten teachers were here at the high school. Woburn Street and North were at the North. Shawsheen and the West were at the West. They had a 3-hour training on the new system. They did some hands-on learning. It was really cool. I was with the kindergarten teachers. They had some manipulatives, and they were practicing some of the hands-on lab activities that they're going to do with students as we roll out the program next month. The second big bucket was at the secondary level, where we had our core content teachers and special education teachers and some paras working in small groups to practice protocols around looking at student work. So we had teachers working in circles with like a Socratic circle. So we had teachers in the inner circle and teachers in the outer circle watching the protocol happen. They were looking at student work, discussing the quality of the work, what they hoped, what you would hope as a teacher to learn from a student's work, looking at it, whether or not the work was appropriate, rigorous, et cetera, what next steps you might take as a teacher looking at work like that from a particular student. So it's just getting this to be sort of a part of our regular repertoire. So that's something we hope to build on in the CIT days to come. And then the third big bucket had to do with special education, where Allison, Christine, and Leanne threw together a series of programs today. As you know, with special education, there is such a diverse groupings of educators. You've got your program special ed teachers that, some are doing behavioral programs, some are doing social emotional programs, right? So it's no way near a one-size-fits-all. We have our clinical staff in one room. We brought in some speakers for these groups. Some of them were in-house. Leanne ran some special sessions for educational assistants to discuss their role in the classroom. So they did a nice job of diversifying the offerings for those teachers today. So it's a 3-hour chunk of work time. The dismissal times makes it very challenging because teachers are out at all different times, and it makes it difficult to get everyone together, but I really appreciate the effort of a huge team of folks that came together today to put something together for teachers that I think was valuable. So. And I can come back to the committee as we get closer to January, because we'll have a much clearer picture of, right now it's very sketched out for January, March, and May, but I could report back before that and have a much more detailed plan for the committee at that point.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Mr. Smart?
As I was looking at the K-12 performing arts, they did a peer observation system through Google Classroom. Could you just maybe explain a little bit? That sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah, it actually was. I stopped in today, and it was very fun to watch them do this. So because they are all over the district, many of these teachers are in multiple buildings. Because of the dismissal times, they don't have a lot of time to sort of observe each other or even meet together. They had a desire to come up with a system of sort of posting lessons that they do for their peers to watch and comment on. So Julie Kelly, who works at the high school as a tech integration specialist, worked with them to customize, again, through Google, what an amazing platform, but to customize a system that's specific for them, and all of these teachers now are a member of this group, and they can, if I'm teaching an ORF lesson in grade 4 for my general music class, I can video that using my phone, and then I can upload that into this internal system, which is only open to the Wilmington music teachers, and I can share it with my fellow elementary music teachers, say, I just taught this lesson, take a look and tell me, what do you think? Maybe I want feedback, or I'd like to share this with you because I just found this material and I think it's really a cool lesson to do. So it provides them feedback and that collegial work, but it also allows them to share with each other. So they were doing it today. They all brought a video that they uploaded, and then they practiced sort of giving each other feedback. And I thought it was quite innovative for them to come up with that idea. It's a way to remotely observe each other.
Thank you.
Just a quick question on that note. With that transpiring, I know there's been some previous discussion, nothing too involved with regards to flipped classrooms. Is there any intent or any kind of thought in the future to maybe do a hybrid kind of version of, since you have these videos, you know what I mean? Whether it be snow days or, I mean, something in those kind of extenuating circumstances to either support a lesson that couldn't be taught. I don't know, I just didn't know, it might be a little too preliminary in the process, but I just thought you know.
That term was actually, when I was watching the music teachers today, that actually came up. And so this is like we're on the edge of a flipped classroom kind of idea. So I think it's in people's minds. I don't know if it's something that could possibly be discussed when the technology committee, for example, is talking about the future of tech integration. I won't touch the snow day thing. I'll leave that to Dr. Brand. But certainly, you know, the whole idea of flipping, and I know that we do have teachers that experiment with that now, in particular the secondary level. You know, so I have heard teachers talking about that in district. It's something I can look a little more into.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I'll just say, looking at our strategic plan, I think that how we're spending, or how the teachers are spending, how you're spending your time actually really is mimicking what things we said are important to us, right? So I kind of was tallying, and I was like, oh, there's a large focus on safety and social emotional learning, and there's a large focus on equity and inclusion. And so it seems like, and I'm sure that's what was thinking about how is this aligning, but it really does feel as though when I look at the plan, I'm like, oh, this actually lines up pretty well. So kudos to you. So thank you for that.
No, it's not me. It's a big team of folks.
The team, kudos to the big team. Okay, yes?
Looks like several groups of teachers were doing an activity exploring protocols for reviewing student work, a lot of core content teachers. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, so that's what I was referring to earlier, where they were sitting in, you know, inner and outer circles, and they were, so a teacher volunteered to bring a piece of work and the student work, and then she distributed that, and they discussed it. There was, I think, 3 or 4 questions that they were focused on, and the teacher that actually brought the work couldn't speak, had to sit outside and not answer any questions while they kind of talked about it. So it was really powerful. A lot of good conversations were had there.
If you are a Twitter follower of the superintendent, you'll see one of those pictures today of the circles of the math department. We're in that.
Check Twitter.
I'm at 891. I'm shooting for 1,000 this year.
To hear that,
Just saying.
Wilmington, follow the superintendent on Twitter.
That's right, thank you.
And if people wanted to do that, how would they? What should they do?
You can
Where do
find
they go?
my Twitter handle
on the
on the district website. It is there. Wait till snow days.
WPS Super?
At Super WPS.
Super WPS, I always get it wrong.
Snow day time will elevate that, I'm sure, so. Sorry to interrupt, Chair.
Okay, so that brings us to the next chunk of our meeting, which is the first reading of revised school committee policies. And there's quite a few, so I think what we'll do, so Mr. Ragsdale and I did some of the edits and revisions, and then we met in the subcommittee with Dr. Regan and Dr. Brand. And so what you have before you are the revisions. You'll see them in red, usually red lines, although in the next set I think they might be blue, but for now they're red, so. And we will, David, you and I have the minutes, so that might, I don't think everyone has the minutes, right? We just have the minutes, so if we get confused, we can kind of look back to the minutes to sort of help figure out the change. So what we'll do is we'll go through them one by one, talk about the changes we made, see if you have any questions, concerns, discussion, and then we will vote. No, this will be a first reading, so we actually won't do anything, we won't accept it tonight, we'll come back to it next meeting. And so, and this will be, I think, the way it goes for some time, because there's a lot of policies that are being revised. Do you want to add anything to that?
Just a couple of things,
Yeah.
more housekeeping, if not anything else. So thank you first off to Jen and to Dave. They have jumped in and done really a huge amount of work already. We were sort of in a place of somewhat idleness, if you will, in terms of regularly reviewing policies, and that's even if there are no changes that are coming from some place to impact a policy revision, it's still good practice. MASC would suggest that a school committee is regularly reviewing policies, so for members of the community who might be wondering about that, that's number one. Number two, even if there's a policy that doesn't reflect any changes, it's with intent that through Tristan's efforts, we'll capture the date in which the the review takes place. And then thirdly, we are also, and I'm, again, with Tristan's help, but focused on making sure that our policies, they are online for members of the community to review and access on the website. They're more accessible, I would suggest, than they have been in the past. And once you do a second read on the policies and those are finalized, we'll work as quickly as we can to make sure that they are updated and the policies online reflect that. So, thanks.
Okay. Mr. Rex, do you want to add anything else before we move in?
I would just say that a lot of what we're doing in these revisions is a combination of just updating some of the language to standardize with what the kind of the online policy manual that MSC has as sort of their model policies. So some of it is just, very inconsequential things, but just, making sure that they match up there if there's no reason for them to be different. And in other places, we're considering whether any of the differences are something that we want to have differently specifically for our district. And so it's a combination of both kind of doing some copy editing in some cases of just kind of like looking for, matching, but then also thinking about, is this something that we want to continue having as our policy? As well as when we look at them, also thinking a little bit about, and by the way, are we doing this? We're not just looking at these so that they match another document that's online, but also thinking about them in the context of, is this something that we do? And, if not, then we need to either adjust the policy or adjust our practice, because those should definitely be aligned.
Perfect. Okay, questions before we start? And so the first file, you'll see at the top there, it will have 2 letters. It says AA, and it just kind of goes through like that. So on file AA, there were no edits. All we've done is added that it was, we reviewed this in the subcommittee on August 28th, 2019. You've had a chance to look at them, but if you have any questions, there was a little red mark. It was just an extra space, so there'll be little kind of edits you'll see, but any major changes you'll see in complete red lines. Questions? Do we document that we've done how does that work? We've done the first read, we move on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. AB, the people and their school district. Again, this was formatting. No changes or edits were required. We made a couple of formatting changes and then reviewed August 28th, 2019 at the bottom. But please feel free to stop and ask questions. It doesn't just have to be for those specific things.
I think
Mr.
my only
Fennell?
thing on this one was, it says reviewed August 28th, 2019, and then in sort of the footnote, it says 9/18/2019. There seems to be a little discrepancy between dates.
I'm like, I don't know.
That date will change each time we are looking at the document,
Okay.
so that's just an automatic date.
So we know which one we're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the 1920 policy
Yep.
manual at this point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions about AB? Okay. Brings us to AC. Here you'll see some changes from school system to district. You'll see some additions. So following, so where I should start. Following national origin, sexual orientation, disability, pregnancy or pregnancy-related condition. So that was an addition to the MASC policy handbook, so we've added it here.
I have a point of clarification. With regards to the legal references, I see that some of the things were struck out. Can I just ask, is there another law that supersedes them? Is that the reason why they were struck. I was just curious as to the, like, Chapter 766 of the Acts of 1972. Is there another law that was created after they updated Chapter 766, or, I was just curious.
I think in some cases, it is that, like the
Okay.
the one below that, you can see that the date that the law was amended
Okay.
was changed, that you have a 1993 law, that's the Education Reform Act,
Okay.
that had some, amendments and changes to it in 2011. In other cases, I think it's purely a matter of citation, that they've just chosen to drop certain citations. Legal citation is kind of a weird craft and art, and there are like lots of ways you can do it, and I think they, in a few places, just made a choice to, we don't need this particular reference, even though the law didn't change. I think that's what the top one is.
Very good. Okay, thank you for that.
All right. And this brings us to ACR. This is not listed in the MASC model document, and so the subcommittee recommended to delete the entire section, including the appendices. The bullying reporting forms and the appendices are not the current forms used by the district, and so it was out of date. So we went through it piece by piece, and it was either included in another policy, or it was not, it was included in another policy. So things have been shifted. This had remained, but bullying, for example, wound up somewhere else, and so it was sort of repeated here and was not up to date. Questions? Oh, and so you'll do a lot here, because those are all the appendices, sorry. So the next one you'll see will be ACA, non-discrimination on the basis of sex. We amended the legal reference section and then added reviewed August 28th, 2019. Questions?
Just a quick one.
Sure.
I know in this one, as well as some others, it says it states that the committee will designate an individual to act as a school system's Title IX compliance officer. What is typically the protocol? Like, if people were to search for this officer, where would they find that? Would they have to call the district, or is it on? I think it may have come up eons ago, about including who the current officer is, so that if patients, excuse me, long day at work, if parents are looking to inquire, who would be the contact? And I think sometimes with the sensitivity that requires that inquiry, I just don't know if there's a way maybe in the basis, in the website, under central office, with a compliance, whether that could be listed or some kind of reference. I just wanted to throw that out because I know that it appears in.
It's a great question. I would say to you that in addition to the website possibilities, but in all honesty, I don't know that we currently have those designated or called out in some place. However, they should be called out in our handbooks. The high school they are, so that's, and that, as a communication tool, that's a great example of something where it's really, I think, in my role, that we shouldn't be relying upon our community members to know about your policies, but drawing attention to them through some sort of more user-friendly document like the handbooks generally. So that they are called out in that, in those handbooks, as Dr. Egan said.
Do you think that maybe, I don't know if it's a disclaimer, because I know the website is different now as we search through policies, if there's some ways that, please reference, for the officer, please reference the particular, I don't know.
Well, I think we have, if I could just add to that, I do think, even though that notwithstanding what I just said, I do think that that falls to me under another umbrella of how we can still improve greatly the information that we do have. And so I can envision that kind of information can fall to the Student Support Services Department as we're adding to the information that's posted there. So there's multiple ways that our community members can know who to go to if they have an issue.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So that brings us to ACAB. So we did some bolding where it said grievance officer. We inserted director of student support services and director of human resources. You'll know, so under number 3 there, after reviewing, you can put the name, but we decided not to do that, not to make it available in other places, exactly what we just talked about, but,
And if I may, just the idea of not including a person's name in the policy,
Yeah.
such that when the person moves on and there's transition, you know, that just doesn't look good if we
One less
have.
place to have to
one less
correct.
place.
Correct.
They have to
right,
find it.
right.
Have the role.
Let's see, this one in my notes for some reason, so. Looking at ACE,
I'll add a note to that one.
thank you. I'm not seeing it in my note, yeah.
I was deleting policies going through and somehow I scrolled down too far. So I ended up deleting ACE, which had no changes to it. So I had
Okay.
to put it back, which
Okay.
is why it's completely back.
I was like, I don't have any changes here, I'm so confused.
I
Okay,
did send you that note, but
Yep.
that was last week, so.
perfect.
So,
Okay.
so if I may, there's essentially 4 pages to that. There's 2 pages that are the policy and 2 pages that are redacted. It's the same thing, it's just deleted in error.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
I went back and realized, I was not supposed to go that far.
Very good.
Just gonna do a quick check. So it's not in the minutes, do you notice that? ACE? So, but we can come back to that, I'm just trying to,
Yeah, it's not.
so I'm wondering why it's not there, that's all, I'm sorry. ACE. No, I mean, it's here, I don't know, it just must not have made it into the minutes. And so it looks exactly the same, okay. So unchanged.
It's in the minutes from September 11th.
Oh, it's in the next one,
I think
thank
we
you.
were out of order for some reason.
Ah, thank
Oh,
you.
yes, thank you.
Oh, because those were Steve's thunder that I gave to you, so.
So they came in after?
Yeah.
Okay, sure, sure. All right, so I think that brings us to AD. And we've suggested removal of this section. This is not included in MASC's online policy handbook.
I think we can also talk about AD and ADA together.
Together, sure.
Because we're recommending removing both of them.
Yeah.
And for kind of similar reasons that, for example, I think that this is especially, I think, true about ADA when you talk about school district goals and objectives. It's like, we've just written a whole strategic plan in which we've defined much more clearly what our goals and objectives are, and to some extent also our educational philosophy. And it seems that that's the more appropriate place for that information and that language to live, rather than in our policy, formal policy book.
I would just add, it's not really, it doesn't seem like a policy, it's not, it's just, I don't know why it would be in there, and it could be something that could go out of date really quickly, so I think it's better to not have that.
Well, and we started having the conversation because MASC actually changed it to mission statement. So it no longer says educational philosophy on their handbook and mission statement. And we said, well, wait a minute, we've just redone this whole plan, and aren't we already doing our missions, and won't that conflict with our own mission statement? And so, but that's why we recommended deletion, but.
Can I ask a question? For the same reasons that were discussed, stated by Mr. Samaha and and the subcommittee's thoughts. I agreed with the deletion of it. Can I ask you, was there ever a discussion of, I don't know, something about referencing the strategic plan and goals, with our Wilmington's vision statement? Granted, I know it would be something that would be ever-changing, because I think our vision needs to evolve as education does, but with like maybe a hyperlink to the strategic plan. I don't know, I just threw it out there. I don't know if that was something that you considered, or if it's even a viable.
We didn't discuss that in particular, but we did discuss using our handbook in those sorts of ways, the school committee handbook. And so wondered if, maybe not in the policy, but in the handbook that we've just revised, might be a place for those sorts of hyperlinks and where people can go to, say, the strategic plan, as opposed to having it in the policy handbook, that we're trying to have it match up as closely as we can to the MASC policies.
This would be something, it would be something, okay, in addition, because that would, I think, would be more unique to Wilmington and our district, and how the board, I think the purpose of those two policies previously was so that the community, should they be seeking out, what are the goals that, education's focused on? I mean, things have evolved since these two policies, and I just didn't know if there was something more updated, not in this format, that would could be linked to the strategic plan, because I think that you're perfectly right. I think it's an ideal aspect for reference if someone were to seek out, or somebody were exploring our district and how we educate our students. Like I said, it may not be a valid point, but I just thought I'd throw it out there to see what your thoughts were.
Other thoughts?
We didn't discuss that. That
All
didn't
right.
come up in the subcommittee meeting. So we had no thoughts at the time on it.
All right, sorry.
But
It's not,
I think
I
it's
mean.
not something not to, and this would be part of, I think what we were doing was trying to have some of those conversations, but very focused on getting through the bulk of them. So I think when something strikes you in this particular meeting, then I think that means it's worth discussing. So any thoughts on that?
I mean, my thought is that people who are interested in sort of finding what our goals are and what we're planning to do and our mission and so forth are going to head directly to the strategic plan, and that's
Okay.
going to be socialized
That's
very,
true.
very prominently, and hopefully very prominently and easily available. And I don't think there's any, necessary negative thing, but I think it's just not needed to have
Nope.
a policy in the policy manual that in the end is just pointing us to the strategic plan, which should be
As
hopefully very,
available.
very easily findable and available.
That makes sense, I'm sorry, I just,
Other thoughts? You agree, you think?
thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. That brings us to ADC, tobacco products on school premises prohibited. No changes. Next, you will see ADDA.
So this is an addition from the, I guess it's on, I think, the third page, starting near the bottom. An addition of a section from the MASC policy manual, and this is in the background, involving background checks. That basically says two things. So the first part is that if a school gets incomplete information back from a criminal background check, or simply has not received all the information yet, that they can essentially go to the candidate, go to the person, and request information directly. That if the information is incomplete, that, as they say, they can request that the individual, after providing a copy, of the check, provide additional information regarding the results. That's one part of it. And then the second part that says, in exigent circumstances, an employer can, pursuant to regulations, hire someone on a conditional basis before the complete background check is completed. So those are essentially the two pieces of, not information, but the two parts of that policy that is from the MASC reference manual.
Questions CADDA-R, which is Corey requirements. MASC recommends the district check the current Corey policy against the model policy to ensure that it meets minimum standards. MASC recommends the district maintains both its own policy and the department model policy. Okay. No, so no changes, sorry.
It's all right.
What's all this language? And then the same with AE, no changes. And that's it.
And on the BA.
All right. And then your next stapled packet starts with BA. Here, you'll notice we've just changed system to district. Other than that, no changes. BAA.
BA just has a little bit of slight rewording to make it less awkward in the first paragraph. And the final paragraph was deleted because apparently we're supposed to be evaluating ourselves according to this policy. This is one of those where you look at it and say, we haven't really been doing that. And we also wanted to, we didn't know where we necessarily wanted to go, but we certainly figured that we don't want to have a commitment to a date that we're supposed to be doing it when we haven't really been doing it at all. So we figured that at least in the meantime, we can take out that we're gonna do it every March. And then we can consider, what we want to think about this policy as far as actually enacting it, or if we want to make any changes to it. So this is one that we definitely wanted to bring to the full committee for discussion, because we did talk about in our retreat in June, we did talk about doing some self-evaluation, and that was something that Mrs. Burns did some research on as well when we were looking at the policy, looking at the handbook.
And I think just to keep everybody on their seats, I did pull some information from a variety of other states and school committee members, just to get a variation what tools boards use to do self-evaluation. I was hoping to maybe have a discussion as it pertained to the handbook, because needed to add the new rubrics, but I do hope to bring it forth, maybe some choices, so that the board can kind of discuss how how they feel. And I mean, it can be just some samples, and we can hybrid it, but I know that Mrs. Broussard last year, we did it a bit of a hybrid way, where we kind of talked about it, I think it was either at a retreat but it was verbally done with regards to the goals that we want to set for ourselves and how we feel we've responded thus far to certain elements, but more to come hopefully with that in the near future.
To a future
And I think our feeling at the subcommittee meeting was that we can make these, small adjustments now, but that this could be a future agenda item to come back and discuss in more detail how
Exactly.
we want to go forward with this type of thing. And then we can perhaps do a revision to the policy in earnest when we've decided what we want to do.
All right, that brings us to BB, School Committee Legal Status. Our recommendation was to delete the first paragraph, as it's not in the MASC sample policy book. MASC recommends a statement that outlines specific details about serving on the school committee in Wilmington, such as term length, number of members, election provisions. We had no new language to address this recommendation from MASC at this time.
The language here also does not actually accurately describe Wilmington, where we do
Right.
not appoint 7 members of the school committee at town meeting. So
Right.
that also seemed a reason to get rid of it too.
I think in our charter, that's probably incorporated as to how Wilmington does offices, if that's something. you
We have a later section
There is
in
something
policies
that
that we were
comes
actually
up.
just looking at in today's meeting that addresses school committee elections. So
Okay.
there
Oh.
is a part later on where we talk about that.
Perfect.
Next is BBAA, School Committee Member Authority. We edited the first paragraph to reflect MASC recommendations. Suggestion to change to non-gender specific pronouns. So you'll see, we replaced his, her with their. A change on number 4. Mr. Rexall, was this yours?
Yes. The changes to number 4 were largely that it seemed to us that when they're when making a general duty, which we thought was described maybe better as effectively rather than harmoniously, but that the 2 things that they mentioned here are certainly things to be avoided, but you could list 10 more that describe trying to work effectively with other people. And so it seemed that just singling out those 2 as if these are the only 2 ways that you can not be working effectively people, you have the 2 extremes on one side or the other, didn't need to be specified in this way, and that we can keep it as a more general statement of, working effectively with other committee members, that is part of the duty and obligation as part of the commitment. And of course, we address this also in our protocols in a more specific way as well.
For number 6, MASC has it as to vote and act in committee impartially for the good of the students. And so we just changed the wording for the good of all students. And that's it for that one. Questions, concerns, discussion?
Thank you for all the
Nicely
work. I know
done.
this was very time consuming. I appreciate that.
So we get to do that all again next time.
More to come. Much
We'll
more
have
to
to
come.
think of
Look at
how,
all the way to
there's
bring the
gotta be a
popcorn.
better way. So we'll think, this is our first time, I don't think, as long as I've been on the board, we've never reviewed that many at one time. So we'll we'll brainstorm some ways to make this not feel quite like that. Because there will be a second read of all, and then there's actually a first read of a good sum of other ones. So I think once we get through it, once we've done this all, it's not gonna feel like this ever again. It's just the first time through. So thank you for your patience, and I appreciate you reviewing all those ahead of time.
Thank you and Dave for undertaking that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to, should we have to accept the first read?
Oh, that's right, yes.
A motion to accept the first read. Will someone make a motion? Mrs. Newhouse, seconded by Mr. Fennelly. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I was looking onto the next one, okay.
All right, so that now brings us to 6G, which is second reading approval of school committee policy GCS. And this is our second read, and there is a motion here. This is the posting of collective bargaining agreements and the superintendent of schools employment contract. We had a little discussion last time. Is there more discussion on this policy?
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Should this policy go through, as I'm optimistically hopeful, how soon would it be posted to, how soon would the contracts that have been requested to be posted? What's the thought process?
Yes, I have given that thought. Thank you for the question, and I would like to suggest, I think it certainly would be possible by around October 1st, because there's some time to sort things out, make any provisions on the website as needed, and but I certainly
That's
think.
Tuesday, so.
Well, yeah, around October 1st, but give or take a couple hours here or there, but in relatively short order.
Very good. Thank you so much.
I thought Ken was standing by right now, waiting for a phone call.
Maybe.
Second the vote is recorded, he's just ready with his
Maybe.
finger on the button to
But-
make it go live.
That's why he left when he did.
I know.
Any other questions or discussion on this?
I'll just say, I think that I think that it makes sense, just in terms of transparency, that, you know, people are sending their kids to schools, they want to know what are the conditions.
Yeah, and I'll just add, again, I think I said this last time, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but certainly if you were to look around, many districts do this. Not everyone. Many will post the contract as collective bargaining agreements and/or the superintendent's contract, but I do, in the spirit of transparency, think it makes total sense and can be a good reference for all, so.
Excellent. Mr. Ragsdale?
I move to accept the second reading and approve policy GCS.
Is there a
Second.
second? Mrs. Burns, thank you. All in favor? That is unanimous. Ken Lord, wherever you are. All right, that brings us 5 minutes ahead of schedule to public comment. Anybody? And now we'll go to other reports. Are there any subcommittee reports? Mr. Ragsdale and then Mrs. Burns.
So I'd just like to report on the last week's CPAC meeting.
Great.
So the Special Education Parent Advisory Council had their first meeting of the year, and I'm happy to report that they had some really good turnout. Parent outreach was one of the things they also talked about during the meeting, but it was in the context of having some nice turnout at the meeting. So at the last few, sometimes it's quite often just the board members themselves, and we're down to only a handful of those, but there were 8 additional parents who came out to the meeting. And not only was it just, I think really helpful and informational for them, but it just lent a really nice energy to the meeting, that they had, questions and as well as comments and contributed in a very nice way. So that was something great to see, and I would encourage all those to return and more to come. So that was very nice to see. As far as some of the substance of the meeting, they discussed a little bit of the feedback from their presentation at the end of last year. So when they gave their presentation at our school committee meeting in early June, and they got good feedback from that, and hopefully that was also part of the good feeling that brought some additional people out to the meeting coming in this year. They talked about the workshops that they're going to offer this year. So they always offer the basic rights workshop, which is required by law, but then they have to make some other choices, and they're going to be coordinating with Alice and with Christine Murray, with Leanne, who were both at the meeting as well, to make sure that they don't overlap. And they will also be talking with Christine Murray, who coordinates similar type meetings. They want to make sure that they don't overlap. So there's some discussion about the types of workshops that they might have. A discussion also about possibly restarting parent support groups. Something that they've done in the past is offer support groups where some of the board members will just offer to be available. It's kind of like in the back room of Panera on a Saturday, and if you have issues and you need to come talk about them and talk about advocating for your child, that they present that. And they haven't always done it every year, but there is talk about doing that this year, which is, again, the type of resource that they provide to special education parents in the community. One last thing I'll mention is that there was some discussion also about the change that we made to the school calendar, about the starting up of the school year, about having that first day being an early release day, to give the teachers more time to get started in school and be able to launch school successfully, and a desire to kind of still have thinking move in that direction, to make sure that all of the teachers, especially those who have to work with IEPs and new 504 plans, are ready on day one in the classroom to be able to fully implement those.
Excellent, thank you very much.
The Wellness Advisory Committee met for the first time last Tuesday since the end of last school year. It's always a wonderful opportunity. They're very, Doreen Crow and Laura Stinson, very creative. It was more of a catching up. Some updates they provided is that they were creating a wellness calendar, but they found it to be too cumbersome, adding all the highlights of, Autism Awareness Month, and it just becomes too cluttered. So what they are proposing to do is create a newsletter that would be electronically sent out to parents quarterly on certain elements of the season, fall, spring, winter, summer, for parents to share, such as flu vaccine season, activities to do with your, family activities to do with your kids, things of that sort. So that's something new that they're going to be composing and trying to get out the first newsletter by, I think, November, the end of November. We also discussed in the interim, what schools were doing or have done, just kind of in the wellness category, just to promote wellness. And so we discussed how the walking school bus and how Laura Stinson is going to be expanding that in the spring, as Dr. Brand had discussed earlier this evening, which is still a hugely popular activity, and I think the kids absolutely love it. And again, it wouldn't be possible without Officer Moon to orchestrate the police officers so that the kids can do so safely. Board of Health is promoting mosquito protection. Roman House has their standing desks, which has been a huge benefit, and it's been reported on the news recently. So we basically kind of shared what we've all done done within the past year to promote wellness. So, so that'll be launching us into our next meeting to focus more on building this newsletter and promoting wellness within our schools and things that can be done with the students every day. So it was a great first start of catching up over the summer and moving forward as to our goals to drive wellness within our schools.
Thank you so much.
I'll just add one thing.
Sure.
I'm just on, to segue there, and I did fail to mention earlier in my report, that all of the schools have recently been sprayed, thanks to Mr. Ruggiero's efforts to help coordinate that. It's actually a large endeavor with all of the red tape, I think appropriately, to go through, but all of the campuses have been sprayed now, as relates to AAA, so.
Excellent.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Correspondence?
None this evening, thank you.
Future school committee dates and notable agenda items. We have the September 30th meeting, that's this coming Monday evening, 7 PM. It's the Facilities Master Plan Joint Meeting. That's at the Wildwood. An agenda will be forthcoming from Town Hall, from the Selectmen. And our next regularly scheduled meeting is October 9th, 2019. And just a couple of upcoming district events. We have the Woburn Street Open House on the 26th and the Boutwell Open House on the 26th as well. So that brings us to two things. So we adjourn and then go into.
Yes.
Okay. So we need a motion for adjournment, and then we'll need a motion I'll do a motion to enter into executive session.
I
Mrs.
make a
Burns?
motion to adjourn.
Second, Mr. Ragsdale, all in favor? It's everybody? Excellent. Then I'll make a motion to enter into executive session. The Wilmington School Committee will vote to enter into executive session pursuant to MGLC 30A S21 A3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. WTA grievance, status of litigation with former employee, after-school program memorandum of agreement, educator evaluation rubric, memorandum of agreement. I'm sorry? From which we will not return. Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Ragsdale. And that's roll call. I'll just go this way.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
And yes. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
He's like a little.
He's all-